guys, just so you know, this is live.
Oh.
You're fine there, but just
okay.
Just so you're aware.
Thank you, Amber.
No.
A live video stream.
Okay, so you're gonna do video from here.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's not gonna be sit. If I'm going down the stairs, yeah, so I should use that as well.
Yeah, because so for this angle you're good, but then for this one, I can get Actually, no, because I'm not seeing him. Like only that way.
Okay.
It'd be better.
If these lights are gonna be off,
Yeah.
so you might not do anything if I walk forward. I'll try to go now.
Yeah, if you see the direction.
Get people out of the way.
Hey, how you doing? How are you? Oh yeah. We managed it. We managed to cover this out. It was tough. It was tough. But yeah. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Millersville University's Ware Center. Like me, I'm sure many of you frequent the Ware Center to enjoy lectures, live music, dance, and other cultural performances. Tonight, we've come together to recognize a moment of significance for the Lancaster City community. A public meeting to introduce the City of Lancaster's Municipal Operations Climate Action Plan. For those of you whom I haven't met, my name is Gil Brown, and I am the Interim Vice President for Finance and Administration at Millersville University. 3 years ago, Millersville University completed its first climate action plan and announced a goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040. Other local institutions of higher education, including Franklin and Marshall University and Elizabethtown College, have similar goals. At Millersville, our efforts to combat climate change have not only realized greenhouse gas reductions, but also save us approximately $650,000 in annual operating costs. As a CFO, I'm sure it comes as no surprise that the cost savings make me quite happy. What might come as a surprise is that as a CFO, I'm not just interested in acting on climate to achieve near-term cost savings. I'm interested in acting on climate because of the long-term threat posed by climate change to our infrastructure, energy costs, and reliability, and most importantly, the health and well-being of our students. I also see in climate change the opportunity to create a vibrant, prosperous, and abundant future that is brimming with advanced technologies, greener spaces, and higher qualities of life for more people. At Millersville University, our new Positive Energy Lombardo Welcome Center provides a window into this future. A super energy efficient building with over 500 rooftop solar panels and a geothermal heating system. The Lombardo Welcome Center generated almost twice as much energy as it used this past year. For those who haven't seen the Lombardo Welcome Center, I invite you to come to campus to see the building. It clearly demonstrates that the solutions to the climate challenge are here today. We need only to find the means to implement them. It's for those reasons that I want to congratulate Mayor Sorace and the City of Lancaster for your leadership on this issue and for inviting the community into the process. There is so much to love and care for in this city. A rich art and theater scene, vibrant and diverse neighborhoods, and to paraphrase Tom Friedman, a community full of individuals who trust and respect each other and work together to solve problems. I find that inspiring as we confront the climate challenge. And on behalf of Millersville University, again welcome you and offer our continued support for your climate planning efforts. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the Mayor of the City of Lancaster, Danene Sorace.
Everyone, I just have to tell you how happy it makes me to have all of you here tonight for this launch of our Climate Action Plan. It is really thrilling to have almost a full house, so really thank you for coming out tonight. So we're not just talking about our commitment to climate tonight, we're talking about our commitment to our residents, our businesses, and our visitors. And the way that this is going to go tonight is that I am going to share a little bit about the city's progress. We're going to have a keynote from our very own local celebrity, Marie Cusick, and some Q&A with Dr. Ali, and then also our very own Douglas Smith, explaining more about the details of this plan and what it means. There's going to be some general Q&A to follow, so just get comfortable, settle in, and get ready to, I hope, hopefully learn and ignite more ideas and possibilities for how we can continue this work together. So I want to just do a few acknowledgments before we get going. We started working on this project 2.5 years ago, and it requires some local fundraising. And so we want to thank the Partners for Places, the Lancaster County Community Foundation, the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority, and the Steinman Foundation for their contributions. Local funds like this really make it possible for the city to secure a really competitive grant that called Partners for Places, which strives to create these partnerships between local government sustainability efforts and place-based foundations. So, and of course, we would not be here without the support of Millersville University. And so I just want to thank you again, Gil, and the team from Millersville for hosting us. And as well as the invaluable expertise of Christor, who has been a wonderful support and asset in this process. So can we give them a round of applause? I'd also like to recognize recognize Lancaster City Council members that are in the house. So would you please stand if you are a member of Lancaster City Council, and stay standing for a minute. Who do we have? Come on. There we go. All right. City employee, let's give you a round of applause too. Would you please stand? Thank you very much. I really want to give a special shout out to the Department of Public Works. This work really began within the Department of Public Works, and there's a lot of the plan that is going to rely on the Department of Public Works to execute. And the team within that department has been wonderful in moving this forward and really thinking carefully about how to bring all of these pieces together. Okay, so just very briefly, you may have heard a little bit about our strategic plan for the city of Lancaster, building a stronger Lancaster block by block. This kind of micro focus on our individual blocks puts strong neighborhoods at the very center of what we are trying to accomplish. We are also working to address safe streets for pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars, and in that order. We are also looking to address secure incomes. We know that poverty is a pernicious problem in our community, and how we address this moving forward will define our community for generations to come. And finally, sound government. Sound government is everything that we do every day and doing it well. All of these things are directly affected by climate change in one way or another. And this is why we are having this conversation tonight, because climate change undergirds all of the strategic priorities in my plan and the very future of our planet. So when Douglas said, you know, what's your value slide? I'm like, okay, well, my macro is exactly that, the sustainability of our planet. On the micro level, you know, when we have a severe weather event, let's say the 2016, you might remember the January 2016 snowstorm, that storm wreaks havoc on our budget to the tune of $800,000. That is just one snowstorm, let alone the issues that we deal with flooding along Conestoga, flooding at our wastewater treatment plant, the housing, public housing, that is along the banks of the Conestoga, air quality issues here in our region, which are among some of the worst, and obviously, to Gil's point, saving money. Yes, we spend about 3 to 4% of our total budget of approximately $110 million is spent on electricity costs. There's a lot of costs for moving water and wastewater through our systems. And so the more that we can be thinking about how to reduce those costs, and you'll be hearing more about that later, it has significant benefits and allows us to do other things, or not raise taxes, which is a whole other conversation that I'd like to have with you. Okay, so I am one of many mayors who have committed to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy because of our strategic priorities and all the ways that this impacts the city. So this covenant includes 7,100 cities representing about 600 million people, and this is only a commitment though. So it takes real action to solve this problem. So I thought I'd just start with walking you through some of the efforts that the city has undertaken thus far. So first of all, green infrastructure. You now see it in all corners of our city. We have integrated it fully into all aspects of our governance, and we have become nationally recognized for our efforts related to green infrastructure. What is green infrastructure and why it matters? Most of you probably know this, but we are a very old city. We have a combined sewer system. Wastewater from a house mixes with water coming out of the storm drains, and that all runs together and all requires treatment because we're mixing essentially clean rainwater with dirty water. We need to get as much rainwater out of our system as possible. That will have tremendous savings for us, and oh, by the way, we're under an EPA consent decree to make that happen, and there are real penalties if we don't meet certain objectives. So we have raised a lot of money in grants. We've done a lot of green street projects. We have the most green roofs per capita in the country, and less energy when we have less water going through our system. Our tree canopy program. This is something that has enormous potential and opportunity in the city, and I'm so excited for our tree tender program, which has really, over the last couple of years, just taken off. We have a 28% tree canopy with a goal of 40%. 8,000 trees we have inventory. We have 5,000 planting locations ID. So let me just plant a little seed, pun intended, that if you would like to pay it forward in a small way, sponsor a tree. There are 5,000 planting sites, and together I want to fill every one of them. We've gotten lots of grant funding, and we have hundreds of volunteers, let's make it thousands, hundreds of volunteers that are working to address our overall tree canopy. So this is something that we need to continue to move forward. Has lots of benefits, trees in our community. Everybody loves a tree-lined street. Everybody would like to live in a house with a tree-lined street. And in addition to mitigating or heat island effect, capturing rainwater, all of these things. Plus, they're just beautiful, and there's just something very peaceful about being in a place with lots of trees. So, don't forget, you can support planting more trees in the city of Lancaster. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. We also have some LEED certified buildings, City Hall and our water admin building. We know that the average commercial building is using about 14 kilowatt per square feet. We're at about 10.5 at City Hall. We also provide some facilities for bicycling. This is something that we need to ramp up. Our very own Bernie Harris, who's sitting directly in my line of sight, regularly uses those facilities, and we appreciate that, Bernie. And thank you for leading by example. Okay, active transportation planning. Wow, this has been a long conversation, but very, very important. And we're just so pleased that we were able to partner with the county and the LIMC to create a regional active transportation plan. We understand that transportation planning cannot begin and end in the city. People come into the city, 30,000 of them every single day from all parts of the county and beyond. And we need to be thinking about this regionally. Active transportation planning is a very critical component to moving forward in reducing the overall emissions related to transportation. It really started with a walkability study with Jeff Speck standing on the stage a number of years ago, and then culminating in the adopted active transportation plan just this last April, working on 10 miles of bike facilities and 30 more miles planned. The Walk Works program, which if you don't know is in the Cabbage Hill area. This is a way to get people out and walking around our city. Implementing a complete streets policy, again, making sure that the active transportation plan, and let's throw in some green infrastructure in that, to make our complete streets really much more inviting to pedestrians and cyclists and safer for cars. We have 6 bike share stations. And we're working on the north-south connection from the train station all the way down to Lancaster County Park. That is the Christian Street Bikeway. And then we're also going to be having a series of community conversations about the east-west connections, because unfortunately our city doesn't have a handy thoroughfare that is like Christian Street that runs east-west. So we're looking at Walnut and Chestnut Streets. And then our green vehicle fleet. This is a place where we have room for improvement. About 7% of our fleet uses alternative fuel. We've got some idling reports that we're tracking in terms of tracking our vehicles and what they're doing. We have bicycles that are available to staff. We've also had an F&M student team take a look at electrification for our city fleet and what that would take. And we have been able to decrease our emissions by 5% in the last 3 years. And renewable energy credits. So until we can be producing our own energy, these renewable credits have been a very affordable way for us to be purchasing and supporting wind as it relates to the city energy usage. So in 2014, we were at 10%, and I'm pleased to say we're at 100%. Again, this is one stop on the train of getting to a renewable energy solution and generation ourselves. And then LED streetlights. We are in the process of purchasing 3,400 streetlights right now, and that $3.5 million purchase will save us $450,000 per year. We have new streetlights that are being installed on Manor and King Streets, which look beautiful. Those will be LED, and we are, that energy savings is huge for us. And so when all the streetlights are converted, we'll be at about $500,000 of energy savings, and that's very good for our city budget, right, Patrick? And then water and sewer systems. So these are the places where we have a lot of energy use. If there's one sector in our overall budget that where we know that we have a lot of opportunity, as well as it relates to the climate action plan, it's in this area. The wastewater and water plants have been doing a lot of things and a lot of research to try to figure out how they can be shifting away from the kind of energy usage that's currently happening. So we have LEDs that we're using. We've done a lot of energy efficiency upgrades. We are saving about 500,000 kilowatts per year. And we are also implementing the remote readers that will help us in terms of H2O metering to catch leaks so that we're preserving a very vital resource and also saving energy. And we've got some green roofs on some of our buildings down at the wastewater treatment plant. Waste and recycling. What? It's so dismaying right now that I have more trash that's going out to the curb. I don't know about you, but it's really caused me to think very carefully about every plastic thing that I buy, because there's so little now that can be recycled. We've gone to the 4. There's only 4. And so what we are continuing to do is promote our recycling drop-off center on New Holland Pike. So this is an adaptive reuse of an old fire station, and seeing massive increase in the volume of people that are using that. And we have made a commitment to continue to keep that in operation and find our own outlets for selling the paper and chipboard that we're collecting, as well as other recyclable products. It's been a little tricky because we have to find a place to store it. And we're basically breaking even on this, but it is a commitment, an ongoing commitment to keep our recycling program going. Hopefully that when the market comes back for recyclables, that we'll just be able to quickly pick right back up, especially with the curbside. So just to put in another plug, this is open to everybody. You do not need to live in the city of Lancaster. You can drop off mixed paper, newspaper, magazines, corrugated cardboard, chipboard, hardcover books, and even batteries, and I think CFLs too. They have a little spot for those. Okay. So that is our plan in a nutshell. And I just want to say that this process of going through this plan has really illuminated for me the many ways and efforts that our community is already tackling climate change. And it is encouraging, and it's also, we have to get better at telling the story of the things that our community and the organizations in our community are already doing. There is a core group of people that I've encountered that are in the know, and we need to make sure that more of us are in the know in terms of what is happening in our community. And then before I introduce Marie Cusick, I just want to say on a personal note why this is so important to me. I talked about the micro and the macro levels and that, but I have a daughter who's going to be turning 13 in June, which has its own set of interesting opportunities. And I think so much about the planet that she's inheriting, and I think very hard about my role as mayor and our role together as a community, because we will be judged by the steps and actions that we take that have been so long ignored, and the urgency of this moment and now. And that really does fuel me as I consider the really hard decisions that are ahead of us, implementing this climate action plan is not going to be easy. And there's some low-hanging fruit, but we've picked off a lot of it. And so I just, again, am so encouraged by the efforts that our community is taking. Let's ramp them up, let's talk about them more, and let's support our community in doing more and having this conversation, and also holding our elected officials accountable to be partners in the effort. Thank you. So now I get to introduce Marie, who I think I met like my very first day in office, came in to interview me about Hurricane Maria and the number of Puerto Rican families that were relocating to Lancaster. Again, a fitting connection to the conversation that we're having tonight. Marie is an award-winning journalist with a background in television, radio, and digital reporting. You've probably heard her on NPR and covering issues for PBS, especially as it relates to StateImpact Pennsylvania. In that role, she covers energy and environmental issues for member stations statewide. And since 2012, she's followed the political, social, environmental, and economic effects of Pennsylvania's natural gas boom. It's really through Marie that I learned about all of the different issues that were happening in the northern tier of our state, and also how they were affecting clean water, most especially, as well as land rights. She's produced documentaries about environmental rights and the evolving debate over nuclear power. So please help me welcome Marie Cusick to the stage.
And good evening, everyone. I've spent most of my life in and around Lancaster, so it's really an honor to be here tonight. And for those of you who haven't heard of us, StateImpact is a public media collaboration covering energy and environmental issues. We have a team of reporters in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, and in Pittsburgh. And one of the most interesting things I've learned as a reporter on this job is that Pennsylvania was among the first governments in the world to guarantee its citizens a right to a quality environment. Back in the 1970s, this was added to the state constitution. Since then, today, there are about 3/4 of the world's countries that mention environmental quality in some way in their national constitutions. Of course, the US Constitution does not, so we are a minority. And this being Pennsylvania, these words were actually pretty much ignored for about 40 years. They are inspiring, so I wanted to share that. As we all know, there is no silver bullet to dealing with climate change, but just because we as individuals, as communities, as cities, even as a country, cannot single-handedly solve what is a global crisis, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be acting with urgency. The science is clear. We are experiencing climate disruption right now. For example, just one example, in Pennsylvania, we have seen an average annual precipitation increase by about 10% since the 20th century, and it's projected to increase another 8% by the middle of this century. Pennsylvania is an energy powerhouse. Among US states, we rank second and third for natural gas and coal production, respectively. We are the 4th largest carbon polluter among states. And we know that to avoid the worst effects of the warming, we have to transform rapidly at all levels of society. So we need global leadership, we need national leadership, and we need local leadership. In 2015, the world's governments came together in Paris to pledge to limit the warming, but we cannot only look to politicians, to scientists, to technocrats to solve this. We need to look in the mirror too. And I've looked in the mirror and thought about my own role as a journalist. We have a tendency to sit on the sidelines and stay out of the skirmishes, but in this case, we need to use our voices too. There is no real debate in the scientific community about humans' role in global warming, and it's the job of journalists to help the public understand the many dimensions of this crisis and explain it to people. So, from where I sit in Harrisburg, I do see a lot of action. I'm not here to tell you tonight what you should be doing or how to do it, but I am here to say that you need to act, we all need to act, and that doing nothing is not an option. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges we have is I took that picture because I really like that inscription on the right outside the Capitol. So, like I said, from where I sit in Harrisburg covering statewide energy and environmental issues, I do see many people working hard. I see a lot of action. There's not enough, and it's not fast enough. But one of the reasons is that actually this is just really hard. As humans, we are good at dealing with short-term risks, things that are right in front of our faces. But climate change is one of those long-term, slow-motion risks. It's a massive problem. And just because it's hard, though, that doesn't mean we can't do it. So one major agent of change we've seen in just the past year is young people speaking up and talking about how this is going to affect their futures. If we do nothing, they will be the real losers in this situation. And you may have heard about Greta Thunberg. She's a Swedish teenager. She left school last year to stage a one-person protest outside the Swedish parliament, and she has actually helped inspire student climate strike movements. Students are leaving school in over 70 countries around the world, demanding that adults and people in power take action. So just last Friday in downtown Lancaster, there was a strike, and that is 16-year-old Olivia Shoemaker. She is a 10th grader at Lancaster Mennonite High School. And not only are we hearing voices of young people, but public opinion is shifting as well. One of the things we've done at StateImpact Pennsylvania is partnered with Franklin and Marshall College for the past couple of years. We have polled Pennsylvanians on their opinions on climate change in 2018 and again in 2019. We found that more than 2/3 of respondents said that climate is changing and it's causing problems right now, and they want to see more state action on it. But it's not just the state that can do things. Cities are also showing leadership. 3 years ago, the city of Philadelphia said it would invest $1 billion in public and private money to create thousands of green jobs over the next decade by focusing on projects in city-owned buildings as well as low to moderate income homes and small businesses. This is just one of the initiatives. It's called Sorace Philly. It helps finance the cost of solar installations. It also has a job training component, so young people, as you can see here, they are able to learn how to install solar panels. We've also seen leaders at the state level start to take steps. For the first time ever in January, Pennsylvania got a greenhouse gas target. That was something Governor Tom Wolf did through an executive order. The goal is to reduce emissions 80% by 2050 from 2005 levels. The governor also just announced last week that the state will join the U.S. Climate Alliance, which is a group of bipartisan governors around the country that formed to work together after President Trump said he would withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. Another big initiative is a citizen-led climate petition that was filed last year, late last year, and this is currently being considered and under review at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. It would create an economy-wide cap-and-trade program for Pennsylvania to limit greenhouse gas emissions. It's modeled on a similar program in California. And for those who don't know, cap-and-trade is a program where the government sets a firm overall limit on emissions and it ratchets downward over time, and it gives companies the ability to buy and sell allowances. So it's a market-based way to try to limit pollution. The first successful cap-and-trade programs in the U.S. were used by Republican presidents, first in the 1980s by Ronald Reagan to limit leaded gasoline, and then in the 1990s by George H.W. Bush to limit sulfur dioxide, which causes acid rain. So we have an existing program in the US and California. We also have a regional cap and trade program in the Northeast. And right now, between Maine and Virginia, Pennsylvania is currently the only state that's not a part of that. It's called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. But this petition, if it were to be advanced, could be one way that the state could be part of that. We've also seen some bipartisan work on actually passing laws. So I don't know how much attention this got last year, but last June, Pennsylvania joined 33 other states and Washington, D.C. when it approved what's known as Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, or CPACE. So these programs have become really popular around the country because they help businesses finance the often expensive upfront costs of clean energy upgrades, but they do not rely on taxpayers or the government. So the way this works is in Pennsylvania, as in other states, it allows municipal governments to basically set up a clean energy district. Private lenders come in, they can lend money to commercial, industrial, or agricultural property owners for things like solar panels or better insulation. And the money is then paid back via the property tax bill, so it remains attached to that specific upgraded building, even if it gets sold later. Another thing the state is doing at the end of the year, Pennsylvania announced it was joining the Transportation Climate Initiative. So about 20% of Pennsylvania's emissions come from its transportation sector, and Pennsylvania is joining with 12 other states and DC to create a regional cap system for vehicle emissions. So we'll see that still taking shape, and we'll see how that goes. I wanted to come back to Article 1, Section 27 of the state's constitution, which I mentioned at the outset was pretty much ignored for 40 years. But this time, I've added the emphasis on the generations yet to come. So this is really clearly a responsibility to conserve a healthy environment for the future. And we produced a documentary on this amendment last year, so I actually got to meet the amendment author. His name is Franklin Curry, and he was a young legislator when this passed in 1971. He's now in his 80s, and he's watched it essentially be ignored, which he said was, he said it was misapplied by the courts for so long because they, quote, could not read the English language. However, I will say the courts are actually starting to breathe new life into this amendment. There have been two recent decisions from the state Supreme Court, one in 2013, another in 2017, both are dealing with natural gas drilling, but they upheld a broad interpretation of this language. And now some people are saying that this really creates a constitutional obligation for the state to deal with climate change. That has not been tested in the courts yet, but however this plays out, I made that documentary about this amendment, and I'm here telling you about it tonight because I want people to know that these words exist. I grew up here in Pennsylvania. I don't remember learning about this as a kid, but it's here, and I want everyone to know that a healthy environment is your legal right in Pennsylvania. So we have a special guest joining us via Skype tonight. Richard Alley is the Evan Pugh Professor of Geosciences at Penn State University. He is an internationally renowned glaciologist. He studies climate change, and he's actually just also an excellent science communicator. Hi, can you hear us, Dr. Alley?
Oh, I can hear you just fine. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for joining us tonight. I think you just got back from Iceland.
Indeed, I had a good time. I was stopped in Philly to chat with some nice people there, and looking forward to chatting with you.
Well, thank you. So one of the first questions I have for you is when we all think about climate change, a lot of the time the numbers really don't seem to resonate. We hear about a few degrees of warming, or we hear about a few feet of sea level rise, and those can seem small to us, but why do these numbers matter so much?
Right, the difference between an ice age world and today was about 4 degrees or 5. It's a fairly small thing in this world, but in the ice age world, as you probably remember, New York, Boston, underline, will be warm 4 or 5 degrees was that. In a few degrees, places on Earth start to get healed. As in, you were sitting outside, naked in shade in the wind, drinking water, you die of heat stroke. That's only a few degrees Celsius will average away from where we are now. Small changes can have big effects, and the science work in these effects.
Can everyone hear him okay? Okay. I think the connection's a little shoddy, but since I've interviewed you about this before, the height of the last ice age was 4 degrees cooler.
Yes.
So if we go up by 2 degrees, we're doing half an ice age of warming. So if you can imagine a mile of ice on top of North America, that's how much 4 degrees the other direction was. It's a big change. Hopefully the connection stays stronger, but can you just talk about why you got into climate science? I mean, what were your early inspirations for pursuing this line of work?
Yeah, I had good teachers, good family. We loved going out and seeing the world. I collected rocks, and I became a geologist, and I needed a summer job really badly. There were 2 open. One was cleaning fossils with a dental pick, and the other was helping the glaciologists. And I started helping the glaciologists in the summer of 1977, so I've been at this for almost 42 years now, and it's been a great thing to be doing.
Why should a small, non-coastal city like Lancaster take on climate change?
For so many reasons, it's hard to get through them all. Climate change does affect everyone. Heat stress will be coming if we don't do things. The big picture, and you know this right now, big picture is wise response on climate improves the economy as well as the environment. We have a professor here at Penn State, you probably know Professor Ted. Professor Ted is your Admiral Ted, retired of the U.S. Navy, and he did much work that shows how responsible climate change helps national security. Doing the right thing, so many broad implications for the world. The difficulty is this big picture. And between us and that brighter future, with more jobs, with better health, with all the things we can get, are taking what we know and taking it from the bleeding edge to bright future. And so let's point on there. Mayor Sorace, what City Planner Smith and the good folks of Lancaster are doing is their part to move that brighter future.
What do you think Pennsylvania is going to look like in 25 years?
I am hopeful that it will look a lot like Pennsylvania with a weird smile. We get so much good. We like Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth is a wonderful place to live. We can have cleaner air, we can have more energy if we take our knowledge and we apply it well. We can have the big picture is the wise actions on conservation and energy generation to make more jobs. Some people might lose theirs, if we can make a decision whether we help the losers. But the big picture is there'll be more winners, and those winners can indeed help the losers and still be better off. And so a world where we actually get along, where we're generating more energy in a way that will last our grandchildren and their grandchildren, and it's still been.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Dr. Alley from Penn State University.
Good evening. Good evening. Oh, I'm going to need more of a good evening than that. Good evening. We're just getting warmed up, right? My name is Douglas Smith. I'm the senior planner for the city of Lancaster. It's such an amazing pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad to see so many faces here. I really wanted to do the cool TED Talk thing where I walked around the stage and kept you all, really entertained and all, but I've opted to just stay behind the safe podium here. But I do have the immense privilege and challenge of also telling you how the city of Lancaster plans to address climate change. And the process of this plan really started about 3 years ago, 2.5 to 3 years ago, in the Department of Public Works when I was working there. We applied for a very competitive national grant, Partners for Places, and were able to match that with local funding, which we're so proud to be able to do, and really shows the vision and the faith in our community here. And we leveraged those local funds to make that grant possible. A project like this is really difficult to accomplish in smaller cities. Smaller cities like Pennsylvania don't always have the technical expertise and the staff to be dedicating to these kinds of issues. So this is really a challenge for us, and it really requires integrating this kind of thinking across the board with all of our city staff. So before I get into things here, I want to also add that you're provided a summary document tonight, and I'll be stepping through some of the information on that sheet. So feel free to reference that as we go. I also want to add that Lancaster, in a way, it's a unique challenge, but it's not like we haven't faced challenges of change in the past. And Lancaster is a place that has been adaptive and resilient. It is a place that has responded to changing agriculture, to changing industry. We've reused our warehouses and turned them into new businesses and office space and residents. And so this is the kind of spirit of ingenuity that I think we really bring to this topic. And for that, I think Lancaster is well poised to do this. So I want to start by talking about some of the climate impacts that we're already experiencing here. Lancaster is getting wetter, perhaps no surprise to you. This graph was compiled using weather data from the Millersville University Weather Station. The dotted gray line is the average cumulative monthly precipitation totals in inches, basically for the last 100 years, from 1914 to 2018. That's more than 100 years of data averaged together for each month. So by the end of the year, we would typically have around 43 inches of rain. The blue line shows the monthly precipitation totals for 2018. By February, you can see we're already starting to be above average. And by the end of the year, local Millersville meteorologists at our course declared 2018 the wettest year on record in Lancaster. And this is what that has looked like in the county. This is a picture from last year on 772 near Coldbrook Road. Perhaps you saw it on the news. If this is an analog for what climate change looks like in the future, we need to be anticipating an increase in these types of events. And the city is included in those impacts as well. Flooding can create serious costs for local emergency services, infrastructure repair, and cleanup. And the city itself has experienced rapid flooding as well, especially at its wastewater treatment plant, from a nearby tributary that didn't used to flood quite like it did, but now due to large stormwater amounts, it's overbanking, and large rainfall events, it's overbanking too. We're also seeing increase in temperature. Lancaster is getting warmer. This graph was also compiled with weather data from the Millersville University Weather Station. This graph represents each year's summer average temperature deviation from a typical summer. As you can see, not only does the average temperature increase as the years progress, as shown by the trend line, but so does the magnitude of the warmer than normal summers, especially within the last 20 years. Increasing heat is a concern for so many reasons, they're hard to list, but among them, increased energy costs for our residents and businesses, worsened air pollution, which is a great concern here because we're among the top 20 worst cities of air quality. Impaired water quality as well. from the heat that is then moved into our streams off of warm paved surfaces. And even the death of those in our community who are most vulnerable, typically the youngest, the oldest, and the poorest. This is another graph showing you what the long-term projections are for temperature. This graph comes from the New York Times interactive website. I encourage you all to go home and play around with this. You can input your birth year, and you can look at the trajectory of increasing temperatures by way of 90 days over 90 degrees in a year. So for example, in this graphic we have a resident born in Lancaster in 1960 who would have seen about 19 days over 90 degrees that year. Today we're seeing about 22 days over 90 degrees. By the time that person is 80 in 2040, they could be experiencing 35 days over 90 degrees or more. Another thing to note here is that this is based on signatories of the Paris Climate Agreement meeting their obligations. So in this scenario, greenhouse gas emissions peak around 2050 at around 50% higher than 2000 levels, and then they decline after that, stabilizing. And in response to this dramatic cutback in emissions, the increase in temperatures begins to slow by the end of the century, likely between 3.1 and 5.8 degrees Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial levels. This is not a forecast of what happens under our current policy. So I'm proud to say that the City of Lancaster put together a group of staff and local experts to start thinking about this issue for our city. And the mayor assembled this group, and as a group we had expertise of engineering, planning, grant writing, transportation, energy, facilities management, and more. And I'd like to read each of their names to you and ask them to stand so we can give them a round of applause when I'm finished reading all of the names. Ruth Hocker, City Stormwater Program Manager. Megan Blackman, City Grant Administrator. Paula Jackson, retired City Chief Planner. Dave Schaffhauser, retired City Facilities Manager. Bob Danene, Director for County Transportation Planning. Larry Cohen, Director for the Lancaster Parking Authority. Barbara Wilson, the Director of the Lancaster Housing Authority. Justin Kapotz, Energy Manager for the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority. And Chris Stoyer, Sustainability Director for Millersville University. There's no way that I could have done this without all of their help. Some of the members were not able to make it here tonight, but I want to let them know also that I appreciate their contributions. So the planning process formally started last October with a project kickoff. All of the members received a climate training in November from Elevate Energy, our consultant that we've hired for this process. We had stakeholder interviews with key staff and all of the climate committee members. And in February, we pulled together about 40 different organizations to meet at City Hall and tell them what we were thinking about this issue and get their feedback on it. We anticipate having an actual printed plan in several weeks, probably in early June. So tonight is really just a preview of what that plan looks like. And this is the vision statement that the group came up with. City of Lancaster equitably implements innovative, collaborative, and fiscally responsible strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build resilience to the impacts of climate change. This statement is included at the top of your one-pager handout if you want to reference it again. I also want to highlight a couple of topics here. This vision statement really addresses mitigation and adaptation. We're too far along to just focus on reducing our emissions. And I'm also proud to say that Lancaster is also really focusing on equity here. We don't desire disproportionate impacts or benefits from our work our benefits or the impacts to be disproportionate in our community, especially to those who have been historically disenfranchised. And ultimately, fiscal responsibility starts to take on new meaning when we talk about preserving our children's future. So I'd like to get into some of the data here. And in order to make this vision tangible, we had to pull together a lot of it. including bills for electricity and natural gas for all of our facilities, mileage and fuel use for all of our vehicles, gallons of wastewater processed, among other things. We use the U.S. Community's Greenhouse Gas Protocol to convert that data into carbon emissions. One of the things you'll hear me reference in this presentation is carbon equivalents. So there are a variety of greenhouse gases, and they all have different warming potentials. So what we've done is essentially use carbon as our standard metric. So methane is 30 times stronger, then we multiply that out to get the carbon units. So in this section, I'll be discussing where our emissions are coming from, their amount, and how much we plan to reduce them. This is a graphic of our municipal operation greenhouse gas inventory. I want you to notice how much the city's emissions are coming from energy use. About 84% of our energy, primarily electricity, but also natural gas, to help power, cool, and heat our facilities. While water and wastewater are the largest sources of our emissions, they're primarily energy related, especially electricity. It's energy intensive to pump water and wastewater. The wastewater treatment process also includes nitrous oxide. As organic material is decomposed, it releases nitrogen in a gaseous form. This is what people refer to as the energy-water nexus as well. The pumping and the processing of water also requires energy. If you reduce your water use, you reduce wastewater volumes, and you save energy in the process. So you get a double return on it. The energy other facilities section includes basically all of our other buildings: City Hall, police stations, fire stations, our operations, etc. And of course our street lights and traffic signals and random park pavilions that have energy, and our vehicle fleet as well, which contains not just your average sedans and trucks, but also our street sweepers, backhoes, fire trucks, etc. So all of this carbon and all these carbon emissions together amount to about 17,000 metric tons, which is the equivalent approximately of powering about 2,037 homes for 1 year, to give you a sense of the scale. So this is the big graph of the evening, and maybe the one that makes the paper tomorrow. This graph, this is the one you've all been waiting for, right? This shows the city emissions reduction goals for the years of 2025, 2035, and 2050. At the top, the orange line denotes business as usual, meaning if the city didn't do anything differently than it does now, our emissions would follow that trajectory approximately. They trend downwards because of the anticipated efficiencies in the electric grid mostly. However, this does not accomplish the kind of reductions that we need to mitigate further climate change. The green, dark blue, and light blue are city emissions by sectors. Energy for water and wastewater, energy for our other city facilities, including buildings, streetlights, parks, and our vehicle fleet. Well, I'm proud to say that the goal is to reduce our emissions by close to 79% in 2025 of the city's overall emissions, which primarily requires switching the city electricity to on-site and off-site renewable energy and improving our building efficiency performance by 25% by this deadline. Initially, our goals didn't start out this aggressive, actually, but after discussion with staff, we determined that whether this is what we wanted to do or not, this is what we needed to do, and this is the bold goal that we have to set. It's our calling. And as a planner, this definitely makes me think of the Daniel Burnham quote, and I'd be remiss if I didn't read it. Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. So our hope is that this will be realized, right? Now you'll notice after 2025, the emissions continue to decrease, but at a much less dramatic rate. So if we accomplish our 2025 goal, then we are primarily left with natural gas emissions, our wastewater process emissions, our vehicle fleet, and on top of that, efficiency gains are assumed across the board, making the pool of emissions smaller and smaller every year that goes by. So what's remaining are things that can be hard to get rid of, but are not impossible to address. And I'll get into that a little bit towards the end of the presentation. But carbon offsets are available to, say, reduce that further. But in terms of our actual emissions, this is what we think is realistic and doable. I hope that you're inspired by this. Are you inspired by this? So I'd like to discuss some of the key plan elements for you, or the strategies that we're going to use to get there. Actually, I'll talk about the goals first, and then the strategies for each of those. So first, an overview of what's actually in the plan. We do have our baseline greenhouse gas inventory. You've received the primary overview of that graphic on your sheet, but there's more detail to that, probably about 100,000 cells in Excel spreadsheets. We also have anticipated climate impacts that our consultant have pulled together using the latest and best research. There's a roadmap to reduce our emissions that uses 25 strategies and their emission reduction potentials. And that's broken out into 6 chapters: energy, vehicle fleet, water and wastewater, waste, and building, culture, of sustainability. So I'm going to go through each of these and what those next steps might be. So first, our energy goals. So the first one, reduce municipal energy consumption through energy efficiency improvements. Our goal is to have that 25% efficiency by 2025, and then hopefully hit 50% from there. We also want to transition to renewable energy sources by 100% in 2025, and this is really what's driving the dramatic reduction in emissions that we're proposing. So that will require something like maybe a solar PPA or a biogas digester, or collaborating with Laxwama on a variety of different energy sources that they're producing. Also, all new construction will be built to its highest standard of efficiency with on-site renewable energy when possible. And by 2035, we hope to be producing carbon-neutral buildings when we do build them. Within that, these are some of the strategies that we hope to use. Reduce energy through efficiency, increase renewable energy, consider electrification in certain instances, improve energy habits of our building occupants, LED streetlights, which you heard we're already starting on, and establish energy requirements for new municipal construction. On the right, there's a picture of Rachel's Creperie, a popular business downtown, and they did the right thing, and they had solar panels, and I happened to be out there on the day that they were installing them, and I took this photo, and I have to say I actually frequent the business more often now. Our vehicle fleet goals. Reduce emissions through reduced vehicle miles traveled. We do have to travel, but maybe we can travel less or more efficiently, and that's part of what our new GPS system that the mayor mentioned is helping us to accomplish. Reduce fuel emissions through cleaner fuel technologies. We're at 7% already. We aim for 10% by 2025. We might even beat that goal. And by 2035, 25%, and in 2050, hopefully 100%. Technologies will be changing over that time. Right now, not all vehicles are available in alternative fuels. As I mentioned, we have street sweepers and fire trucks that we're needing to power. That could start with conducting a fleet analysis to help us better allocate our resources there, increasing the number of low-carbon vehicles and also the infrastructure that's needed to install those. Expand our employee bike share. And we have a couple on hand, but perhaps we could have more and ones that are more appropriate for business. Also, reduce employee trips. This is a fleet strategy, but it's also an operations strategy. As we condense our operations into newer buildings, we're able to gain some efficiencies there. Water, wastewater, and stormwater. These are all combined into one slide. They all relate to one another, and many of the emissions coming from water, wastewater, and stormwater are actually addressed in the energy slides. But certainly we want to be reducing our water consumption on city properties, as well as continuing to reduce our stormwater, especially entering our combined sewer system, which makes its way to our wastewater treatment plant, and then we end up having to pay for it. To clean that water. So on the right is a picture of our wastewater treatment plant along the Conestoga. Perhaps you've smelled it driving by. Every time I smell it, I say, thank goodness someone's doing that job. Because really, that is one of the core services that local government provides for all of us. Sometimes I give people, when they complain about local government, I said, did your water turn on? Did your toilet flush? Did the cops show up? Was your trash picked up? You know, these are the services that we provide. So implementing energy efficiency strategies at these plants, looking into combined heat and power, renewable energy feasibility studies, water audits for all city facilities, water efficient features as well, and continuing to implement our green infrastructure improvements. Ruth Hawker, our stormwater program manager, emailed me today and said that reduced pumping and treatment costs from our green infrastructure plan will save $661,000 per year when it's implemented. So again, these are financial investments for us too, financial savings. Waste goals, divert the amount of landfill waste contributed by municipal facilities that cannot be converted to energy. As you know, Lancaster has a waste-to-energy facility operated by Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority. It dramatically reduces the waste going into our landfill, and it powers the equivalent of 25,000 homes. This is a tremendous asset for our community. It actually operates at 99% below air emission limits set by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. The waste is reduced to 90%, the ferrous material is removed from it and recycled, and then the ash is taken to the landfill at a minute amount as to what went in. So waste that would not go to this facility would be construction and demolition debris, and also biosolids from our wastewater treatment plant. So these are the kinds of wastes that we need to work to mitigate going forward. Some of those strategies include a waste analysis, implementing food composting in municipal facilities, committing to adaptive reuse of city buildings like this recycling drop-off center that used to be a firehouse, reducing employee waste, and also reusing office equipment. And I'll also add that the reuse of buildings is an enormous carbon emission savings. There was a lot of energy that went into constructing these buildings, and the more that we can reuse them, the more we mitigate in having to build a new structure. And lastly, building a culture of sustainability. The city aims to change the culture of its workplace and better integrate climate action and sustainability initiatives into everything that it does. While these don't easily have calculated emission benefits, they have a great educational benefit, and they also help to communicate the values of the city to its staff and to the broader community. So these will include reducing excess energy and water consumption by city employees, reducing emissions impact of city employees traveling to and from work, reducing upstream and downstream emissions by assessing our purchasing practices, and also establishing community-wide connections to municipal climate action to encourage more broad-based support. So we hope that this event, for instance, is going to spur larger conversation even outside the city in other municipalities as well. Donna Jessup is one of our star employees at City Hall. She's standing in the middle there in jeans and a black sweatshirt. And she oversees streetlights, vehicles, parks, purchasing, and large equipment. And she does the job of probably 10 people, and she does it well. And she's involved in many of the things that we're discussing here tonight. And that's her with her crew, and they keep a high morale. And so I just wanted to show you a bit of what our city culture can look like in practice. But regarding climate action, we need to dedicate additional staff resources. We need to establish a green team of some kind to help move these policies forward. A green meetings policy is also an option. We don't necessarily have to be in person at every meeting. Integrating sustainability into municipal processes as well. This means when our capital improvement plan comes up, when we pass a budget, when we amend our codes, when we buy new equipment, we need to be asking, how are we accomplishing our climate goals? Our stormwater efforts have become second nature to us. It's become a part of our public art, the ways that we reconstruct our streets, our landscaping. It's even a brand that we put on all of our city cars. This is the type of integration that our climate action needs at the city level as well. So what's next? Some of our city council members are sitting here in the audience. I really love this picture, by the way. You guys look so great here. And I'm not just saying that because you'll be adopting this plan in kind of like a month or so. But certainly, they're the next stop. After we finish writing this plan, they'll be reviewing it, and we'll be getting comments from them and asking their support of this too, which is a really critical part of the process. They pass that $110 million operating budget every year. We also need to establish more working groups internally. We need to integrate this into all of our existing functions, as I said, and share that progress with each other, within City Hall, with our community, and beyond. And also develop a community scale planning process. As I said, this is just focused on our municipal operations, but we hope to be walking the walk before we go out to the community and start asking people what we can do. So here's a look at what you all can do. This is the emissions inventory for the city of Lancaster. It's helped to set a precedent, and it's the first step in shaping policies for climate action, is developing these inventories. Our city operations are only a small part. In fact, they're approximately only 4% of our overall city emissions. And this estimate does not include things like the iPhones that you've purchased and the products that you consume. This is a high-level inventory. So our city operations would be approximately the solid waste emissions from the entire community. So even if the city operations went entirely carbon neutral, we've only reduced citywide by about 4%. And climate scientists like Richard Alley are calling for an 80% reduction by 2050 or sooner. So we've looked at enough graphs, numbers, policies, and such. And you know, the mayor, well, before I get there, I'll mention one other thing. There's a colleague of mine, and I think he's in the room, Eric Souder and Michael Jennings, and I don't know if Eric Westner is around, but these folks are from a new group called Regenerate Lancaster, and they've been talking to me about some of their ideas and how to bring these climate initiatives to the county and the interface between city and county emissions. I wanted to just mention these tonight because this is one of the methods that we could be using to become carbon neutral and offset those remaining emissions even after all the work that we do. And the surrounding farmland is an enormous asset for this effort. If there were concerted effort from farmers to use no-till practices to sequester carbon in their fields, which would only improve their crops, then the city could feasibly become carbon neutral with these additional offsets. You can capture 0.4 metric tons of carbon per acre in no-till, according to the latest research by University of Berkeley, California. So the remaining 2,500 metric tons of carbon that the city would be left with that is so difficult to eliminate could actually be offset by only 6,220 acres of farmland in Lancaster County, switching to no-till for only 1 year. These facts are especially important as we approach a community scale plan, which will require much bigger thinking like this. And finally, Mira Fritz. And the mayor, I think, hit on a really poignant note in talking about her daughter and the importance that children play in this conversation. Mira is the child in my life who is most important. And she's 9 years old, she's smart and rambunctious and carefree, and she really enjoys a good photo bomb. I'm sure you all have children in your life that matter to you, and I'd say that that's a universal desire for us to want the life of our children to be equal or better to the ones that we've lived. Mira also believes that we should all do something about climate change. This is a picture of her demonstrating in Penn Square when students walked out on March 15th to call for climate action. She's especially worried about the animals of the world. And for those who saw the latest report from the United Nations, more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction. Mira's concerns are well-founded. And it's one of the greatest motivations for me in this kind of work. When I was a student at F&M, I remember a talk by a visiting environmental philosopher who said, preserving the world resources and mitigating climate change is somewhere between sharing a pizza and sharing a bike, which I thought was a really peculiar way to describe it. But after I got thinking about it a little bit, I thought it was pretty apt. There are some resources that are limited that we need to think ahead about sharing. sharing, right? That's the pizza portion. But someday we will also have to get off this bike, and it will have to be in good working order for those who come after us. So it's a mix between sharing and sort of taking turns at things. To that end, I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. When I think about the magnitude of the job before us and climate change and what's necessary, I'm reminded of the quote, "Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible." So at this time, I'd like to invite Mayor Sorace and Marie Cusick back up on stage. I want to take questions from the audience. We'll have 2 microphones at the bottom of each staircase. We ask that you keep your comments and questions to 1 minute so we can hear from as many people as possible. And if the questions are of a technical nature, we have other city staff here to help answer those. There will also be a handheld mic that will be available to those who aren't able to make it down the stairs. So please just raise your hand and we'll come back to you. And the gentleman there raising his hand, he's got the mic. So thank you very much.
I was just wondering how you view our great farmland and it's becoming hateful so quickly.
So this is the importance of being engaged in local government, because these are where these decisions are made. I think a lot about how we are creating a city in which we are adding more housing and utilizing and filling in our open spaces here in the city to take pressure off of our farmland and the lands that surround our community that make it so special. And I feel that the city has a role to play in that in terms of urban infill and the ways in which we are adding to removing parking lots, of which our city is 30% parking lots, and how we are using that open space, that available space to build. This is a conversation that as a community there is a lot of, in the city, disagreement about how, like what density looks like, how high our buildings should be, and so on. And I'm really looking forward to hiring our community planning and economic development director to help guide us in making those decisions and thinking about planning in our neighborhoods in a different way, so that we can continue to try and relieve the pressure valve of and preserve all of our open space. I do support Places 2040. I would also encourage all of us to be having the hard conversations with our county government who really don't have any teeth to make those plans a reality. They are recommendations. And this is where our local communities and residents really need to step up and be engaged in these conversations. And unfortunately, too few of those conversations are happening until we get to, I always think we're in, to use a football analogy, and forgive me, I grew up in a house with, this is what we did, the red zone, when you get to the red zone, then we start having these conversations, and it's too late then.
Great, it's just very, very exciting to hear all about this. And my question, wondering about discussions around ways to sort of support private citizens in their own personal efforts. If that was, I missed, or there's stuff around there.
So there's a website called Drawdown. Has anyone checked this out? It's just a giant list of things we should be doing. There's also a really cool book that just came out. It was co-edited by a legal scholar from Widener University in Harrisburg and another guy at Columbia University. It's called Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization. So this was really written for lawyers and policymakers, but as well as the general public. It's a 1,100-page book with over 1,000 solutions for the federal government, state government, local governments. So you can just look through that and look at that too.
with our residents is critical to raising our recycling rates. And we're definitely encouraged that despite the change in single stream, that we're seeing an enormous uptick at our recycling center. So that's certainly something that I would encourage everybody to do, is using the recycling center.
Actually, her question was sort of how. I guess when I came to this, I didn't quite get that this was just a plan for the city's operation, the city government operation, which is what I'm gathering it is. So I guess, is there any part of that, or I'll just say, I guess what I would like to see is part of that being how are you going to expand this into the community, into the private sector. So to me, it seems that part of the city government's plan should be how are we then going to proceed into the community beyond your.
You just laid out part B. And so part A is really, when Douglas, we first started talking about this, one is that we didn't have the resources to do both to the extent that is necessary. And so when we sat down, I'll say that I scaled it back to really focus on the city initially so that we could be leading by example and learning by doing. And in the process of putting together this plan, as I was mentioning earlier, when we had city council chambers full of people from major institutions as well as advocates and just concerned individuals who've been working on this for a while, it really encouraged me in that it's not just the city that can be leading that conversation, but that collectively we can. And so that's part two.
Probably to add to that, I mentioned that, but there are avenues, and I'll give a plug for my utility friends, there are avenues already available to anybody who's a PPL customer or a UGI customer. They have a table out there and they have residential programs to help you reduce your usage, whether it's air sealing or insulation. And I'm sure they would be much more than happy to talk to you about it out there, because I don't know that much about it, basically.
Thank you.
I have a question for Ms. Cusick. I stumbled across your documentary this Christmas. It was a pleasant surprise, definitely a win for public broadcasting.
Thank you.
Not the first time I ran into Section 27, though. I was working with Lancaster against pipelines, Emlyn and Clatterbuck, and they were having some issues with overwriting the legal precedent, because legal precedent is a really messy thing. What do you think it will take to empower that section again?
Sorry, you said they were having issues overriding
that precedent, the legal precedent that was set over the course of several decades. You addressed that in the documentary as well.
Yeah, so like I said, the amendment was added to the state constitution in 1971, it was approved by voters by a 4-to-1 margin. Then it was largely ignored by the courts because of the way it was applied. It was applied and interpreted in a way that made it essentially toothless. But it was in 2013 in a case dealing with natural gas drilling, and then again in 2017 when the court sort of affirmed a broad interpretation of it. But like I said, some people are now arguing, it hasn't gotten to this point yet, that this creates a constitutional obligation for the state to deal with climate change. But those cases in 2013 and 2017 were sort of specific to those, and one had to deal with local zoning around oil and gas, the other was about how the state uses royalty money from oil and gas drilling on public land. So it hasn't been, I'd say, truly tested around a larger climate issue.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could interject one more time, just to follow up on the energy residential grant opportunities, to go back to the prior question. You've seen some of the benefits of stormwater and green infrastructure. The city also has a residential grant program. There's information out in the lobby at the tree tenders table. And we do fund those projects on residential properties. If you have any questions, we're always here to help. Thank you.
Hi. Communities of color are disproportionately affected by climate change. And I believe Douglas was mentioning equity. So how does the city envisions engaging in supporting communities of color here in Lancaster City when implementing this plan?
So that really goes to the heart of our strong neighborhood strategy. And what I have learned over the time of campaigning and being mayor is that our neighborhoods, in particular the south of the city, the conversations with neighbors in those areas focus their issues around climate change and addressing this issue have to intersect with the daily challenges related to housing, transportation, one good job in which you have a steady, reliable income week after week and it's not seasonal. So those are the kinds of things that we need to work on together as we are addressing climate change with the communities that are disproportionately affected. You know that Douglas and I had a heart-to-heart talk about how do we begin to have this conversation when the Lancaster City Housing Authority, which was a partner in this process, has homes that are located in the floodplain. How are we as a community thinking about what do we do in that instance? How do we fund those changes? How are we making sure that we are there to support those individuals and those families? So these are so difficult, the questions are so difficult because it's never just one thing. It's a lot of different things that we need to tackle collectively, and that means that the city alone can't do it. We can bring certain resources to the table and begin to have the conversations together in our communities, and it's going to take all of us to be thinking about how we are mitigating that. I continue to come back to the fact that we are the oldest inland city in the country. There is a portion of our city that has been welcoming, and you know, our southeast of the city is where our city was born, essentially, on Howard Avenue. And I think about the ability of communities to continue to, the resilience of those communities, and how are we helping them be resilient in the face of climate change. And I don't have an easy answer for that. I'm just super aware of the kinds of complexities that we need to be addressing together, and that it's not going to be a top-down approach that's going to really ultimately lift our communities up and help make a more sustainable city for everyone.
Yeah. I'll also add one more thought to that, and as I mentioned that both PPL and UGI have programs for low-income people, and I know a bit more about the PPL program, WARM, the Winter Assistance. I forget what the R stands for, but what is it? Yeah, the Winter Assistance program. But they will actually come in and they'll do insulation. They'll replace your fridge. They'll change light bulbs. I mean, they'll give your whole structure a complete overhaul. So please go visit the PPL table. We set up these resources for you outside so that we can point you towards solutions and things that you all could do and inspirations that you can walk away with. And also, if you don't mind, could you give me a hand in thanking all of the organizations that did come out this evening?
So first, a lot of people probably know me, but for those who don't, I'm Tim Stuber. I'm the Lancaster City government reporter, and wanted to let folks know that due to print deadlines being what they are, we will be online tomorrow morning, but we won't be in print on this until Saturday, so please be patient.
Thank you, Tim.
So two questions, I think one easy, one more difficult. Easy is, might these metrics as you guys go forward be on the Lancaster Blocks by Blocks website? And second, I understand from an email from Douglas earlier today that the financial aspects are still up in the air, but can you say anything at this point? For example, a few years down the road, you might face a situation where green energy costs 20% more than dirty energy. At that point, what do you envision doing?
Oh boy, the hypothetical. So Douglas and I had this conversation because it's really difficult to put a budget to when you don't have a plan. And so we actually had to get the plan in place and begin to look at what the bold goals were, and then back our way into how we are going to achieve those goals. And it's going to be difficult because we have a lot of competing priorities, and how we are utilizing our city resources. And so we're slowly beginning to wrap our head around that, Tim. And I think that part of this process is it's really going to be embedded in the budgeting process for 2020, which will begin in August, when this plan will be completed by then, and we'll be able to start backing our way into what this looks like. The other thing too is that there are other alternatives for how we fund some of these improvements. I had occasion to meet with a company. He was repping a group of private investors who pay for these kinds of municipal upgrades, and the loan is paid back through the energy savings over time. And so it's very advantageous to cities because it's not taking out a bond that's supported by taxpayers. It doesn't mean really anything to the city in terms of a financial return on investment, but it does mean reduced carbon emissions and then eventually a return on investment. So there's different ways that we can go at how we're going to pay for all of this. And Lancaster Black by Black, yes. I mean, this is really being, as part of sound government, this is folded into that, and so yes, in terms of Lancaster Black by Black is a website in which we're tracking our strategic plan and our progress, so you can go online and see how well the city's meeting its goals. It's a way to keep our strategic plan alive and visible, and to provide a transparent way to be accountable to the residents of the city. So that's what Lancaster Black by Black is, if you're wondering.
I'll also add that at the bottom of your one-pager, there's a website, www.cityoflancasterpa.com/climate. So we just created this page today where we've housed some of this information that we've given you this evening. The slide presentation will be available there, and the one-pager is available for download, and a bit of the summary and the graphs that you already have in your hand are available there too. So keep you posted on that site as well.
My question is to the mayor of Lancaster City. How can our neighborhood help you accomplish this? Are you going to communicate with us, community leaders, neighborhood committees, activists? How can we, the citizens of Lancaster City, help you achieve this?
Question very much. So there's a few ways, small and big ways that we can start, and in our neighborhood specifically. So one of the things that we just did on Arbor Day was plant a few hundred trees. And that is a very clear and direct way that you can be improving the sustainability of your neighborhoods and helping us. We can give you a map of where all the empty street tree wells are. We can equip you with, through the tree tender program, equip you with how to go out and knock on doors and get permission from the residents, and to basically be planting a tree canopy in your neighborhood. We can also come and talk at neighborhood meetings about various other ways that your neighbors can participate in these goals, whether that's around tree planting, whether that's around litter reduction, which has to do with stormwater mitigation, whether that it has to do with recycling and the ways in which some of our neighbors who don't have cars pool all of their recyclables together so that there's a once-a-month drop-off that is happening with multiple households. So there's big and little ways, and I would love to come and talk about how neighborhoods can band together to address some of these climate goals that we have, and I really appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
In 2016, in this very auditorium, there was a speaker by the name of Matt Grokoff. I don't know if you were there, Matt Grokoff, and he gave an amazing, inspiring talk about his experience of buying an old building in Detroit and turning it into net zero. and that his philosophy is that we need to fix what we have and leave the farmland alone starting right now. And I've kind of been following him to see, he's from Ann Arbor, and I mean, he's got totally revolutionary ideas on even infrastructure like water and electric and how to replan the whole thing. So I just thought that was exciting, like to create an eco-village of Lancaster, like, somehow. It's, so I don't know if you thought about that kind of thing.
There's some really bold ideas. Rambo Land comes to mind. Does everybody know about Rambo Land? This is like an eco-district that has been the dream of a resident here in the city of Lancaster, and how that dream comes to be. And he was here earlier. Is Ron still here? Yeah, he had to depart. But this idea of how do we create eco-districts and how we think about the reutilization of our buildings and energy, just all of it differently, we have a lot more room to grow. And it's good to be inspired by others, and I'm going to check him out because I wasn't here for that presentation. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we'll take 2 more questions. We've got 3 people up here. Okay. Why don't you go? I'm now moderating. Hi.
Hi, my name is Sheila. I'm a graduate student at Municipal University, and I have a 2-part question. What is the percentage, the proportion of the energy usage of the city as a municipality compared to the city overall? And I'll just ask my 2 questions that way. Okay. And the second part is, what is the cost-benefit analysis that is attached to the city's climate plan and action? Yeah.
You're a little ahead of us, but thank you for that question. Here, take this one.
Really only answer a portion of that question, but so the first part about our emissions. So the city's operations aren't only in the city; they're outside of the city as well, right? So we actually serve something like 160,000 residents of water and sewer. So some of the emissions actually that we're looking at don't actually come from city residents, but they come from the systems that we maintain. So our emissions profile is sort of overlaps partly with the cities as a community. So you can imagine, this is the city's emissions and everything that happens in them, and this is the city operations. There's a bit of an overlap. Our emissions exist inside and outside the city. Nonetheless, about 4% of our emissions, the community's overall emissions, we're responsible for 4% of that. So the cost-benefit analysis is really the work that needs to come after this plan is approved and completed. I certainly appreciate the question, and we want to be working hard to find those solutions and those ideas. We know that there are a lot of case studies out there that show that these solutions are cost-beneficial. They do require sometimes beyond the immediate future, so the payback isn't going to be in 5 or 10 years. But the good news is that municipalities can look in the long term. Our buildings we typically use for 40 to 50 years or even more in some cases. So there's definitely time to recoup investments of these kinds.
Has there been an effort to work together with the adjacent towns around us and communicate and try to move towards some group efforts?
This is a place where there's lots of room for opportunity. That's being optimistic. No, I truly think that is the case. I mean, we are beginning to think about how we're utilizing our resources differently, and those conversations are very exciting as it relates to public safety, for example. There's a lot of opportunity, and there are very few incentives to do so. And there are 60 municipalities just in our county, 16 school districts. The ways in which we self-govern and fund each of these municipalities and how we make decisions defies logic. And So to the extent that the city can, and I think in the area of stormwater, because we've gone first, because of the EPA consent decree and the combined sewer system, we're the only system like that in the county. Others of our neighbors have relied on us to share our learning and our expertise. So in that way, I do believe that there is a level of collaboration, and I think that there's a lot of room to grow.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I want to invite you to please help. Great. Look, you guys are so eager. Thank you. One more question, please.
In your slide that broke down 2015 baseline emissions by sector, 24% was from commercial energy consumption and 18% was from industrial energy consumption. How can we approach reducing those?
How can we work to reduce those? That's an excellent question. So one of the opportunities was actually mentioned in Marie's presentation, the commercial property assessed clean energy. That is an incentive that it was just passed by our state legislature, and it would allow us to permit the investment in clean energy efficiency and water efficiency improvements to be amortized over a 20 to 30 year period. So instead of having to bear the upfront cost of that investment, it could be spread out and made more affordable to commercial and industrial properties. Residential properties, unfortunately, are not eligible for that program. So that's one way that we could help with that. Currently there are some incentives through PPL or certainly a rebate program that they could participate in. So PPL will actually pay you for the kilowatt hours saved over a period of time. So if you, for instance, replace your boiler, you can be getting money back from PPL for that investment. Residents are eligible for that too, so I encourage you to look into that. So the city has recouped about $25,000 from its investments at its wastewater treatment plant through these rebates. So those are a couple of the opportunities that come to mind, and I certainly hope that those strategies will be more fleshed out in part 2 of this whole planning effort, the community-wide climate action plan.
Which is that we, in order for CPAs to really be effective and for us as a community to really realize the full benefits of what CPAs could offer, we need our county commissioners to get on board. And so if you believe that this is an opportunity for us, please write, call, visit our county commissioners and let them know that CPAs is important to our environmental sustainability as a community.
Please visit the tables on your way out and find out what more you can do to help this issue. Thank you so much.